Wendy's is letting you win real food with the Daily Faceoff Survivor game. For those of you who smoke the competition, Wendy's is rewarding you with weekly prizes that will have you winning no matter what. Download the Wendy's app and score yourself 150 bonus reward points on your first order and grab a sweet victory from the mouth-watering jaws of defeat along with some fresh, never-frozen beef. Put your prediction skills to the test and score yourself 1,300 bonus points if you win the week. Use your points to grab your favorite menu items at Wendy's. Sign up to play Wendy's Daily Face-Off Survivor Fantasy to win weekly prizes like the spicy chicken sandwich from Wendy's and the Wendy's app. No comment on this week's game. I'll be back next week. I was eliminated on the first day. I don't want to talk about it. So check it out though, folks. dailyfaceoff.com. You'll find it there. The Wendy's Daily Faceoff Survivor game. A lot of fun for most people.
Love me a Baconator. Oh,
yeah, that spicy chicken sandwich is good too. And they had the barbecue bacon cheeseburger. A lot of good stuff over at Wendy's, and I'll be back next week. Mark my words. See, I had to clear my throat again there. Anyways, okay. Elias Pettersson's next contract.
Too much vaping.
Yeah, way too much Noah Juleson.
Oh.
Ooh. Yeah, I need to get
I need to take a shower after that joke. Okay, Elias Pettersson's next contract. It's a hot button topic in Vancouver right now. Our pal Frank Saravalli, Daddy Faceoff as we like to call him, over at Daily Faceoff, he reported at the GM meetings with Patrick Allvin. He spoke with Allvin and said that they're working toward a Pettersson contract. That kind of sparked all of the conversations we're hearing right now in the media about Elias Pettersson and his contract. Things are progressing well by all accounts. I believe it was Friedman who said it's not a matter of if this is going to get done anymore, it's when and how long. So that's where we're going here. Instead of the when question, we're going to ask how long. Like, what does it look like? And folks, we're going to do anyone else later, but get your Pettersson predictions in for his contract. Give me a short-term contract prediction and a long-term contract prediction, because I believe it was Frank again this morning. Grady, correct me if I'm wrong. Just correct me if I'm wrong. But Frank said this morning that the Pettersson camp is still looking at long-term or short-term. Like, they haven't really decided, even though a lot of the reporting we've been seeing has been saying, yeah, it's looking like short-term. It's looking like 3 or 4 years. I think Sat's thrown that out there. Rick's thrown that out there. Friedman, and, not to put words in their mouths, obviously, but like, we have heard that kind of stuff from them about, it being a shorter-term deal. So I think a lot of fans, just with how many people are talking about it, are preparing themselves for it to be a short-term deal. And hey, that could still happen, but it's definitely not a foregone conclusion that this is going to be a 3 or 4 year deal.
Yeah, so I looked this up in the summer, and there are 15 current NHL players who are signed to a contract with a $10 million or higher cap hit. All but 2 of them are committed for the maximum term lengthwise when they sign that deal. The only 2 exceptions being Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner. So we are when we discuss this Pettersson contract, we know it's typical for these franchise players when they sign big money deals to go max term, but we're entering a new arguably era in terms of the shifting cap dynamics and the expectation of how much the cap is supposed to rise. It's interesting. I did an agents poll in the summer, talking to veteran agents who have high profile clients, to talk to them essentially about, okay, how would you approach these Pettersson negotiations if you represented him? And it was interesting. There were 2 main takeaways from going through that exercise. Number 1 was that all of them seemed to agree that if you're in Pettersson's situation, you don't sign in the offseason. You wait to see how the team starts. And that was before Friedman had the reporting about Pettersson wanting to wait until the season starts. Yeah. So number 1, that already happened.
Is that more about how the team was going to perform once the season started? Is that what that was about?
Yeah. It's also just in general, this idea that the longer a negotiation drags out, in this case, when it's a franchise player, the pressure that's on the organization.
Yes. Okay.
Leverage is just going to tip in the player's favor a little bit. Plus, waiting to see, at that point, the Matthews contract had not been signed yet, which turns out to be, I think, a pretty favorable comparable in terms of he got the really high cap hit, and yet he was still able to sign a medium-term deal. And the second sort of takeaway I had when I did that agents poll was a lot of them were pushing this idea that if I was repping Pettersson, I'd be pushing for a 3 to 4 year term if he's comfortable with it. Because the way you've got to think about it is if Pettersson signs 8 years, and keep in mind that his deal would be kicking in obviously next season,
Mhm.
he'd be 32 by the time an 8-year deal expires. So at 32 years old, he's probably not going to cash in on another massive extension. Whereas if he signs, let's say, a 4-year deal, he's going to be 28 years old when his next contract
And a
is
UFA.
and a UFA. So he's going to be ready for a massive payday at a point where the cap will be likely significantly higher. It's fantastic, not only financially in terms of the upside if he's willing to bet on himself, but also, which a second point, which I think is equally important from a team perspective, right? We know how much winning matters to Pettersson. It's not just about squeezing every last dollar. By signing for 3 or 4 years, you'd be able to match the term of your contract with either Hughes or Demko.
Interesting. I didn't look at it that way. So, okay. So, Harmon, question for you. Would you rather see 8 or 3 to 4 at the end of the day? Like, what does it come down to for you?
If I'm the Canucks, I want 8. I want the maximum term.
Oh yeah.
A lot of people in the chat are asking, how would you get Pettersson to take less? And I don't think this is the player to try to play hardball with here.
No.
Like I wouldn't, is the simple answer. This was the question. What will you do as GM to make PD sign a cheap contract? I don't think this is the player to do it with. I just
Free meals at Elisa.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'd
Restaurant for
offer him
life.
ownership in the team. I don't know, like a free apartment or something in Aquilini South. I don't know.
You're gonna
Like
break every CBA rule, Quad.
Hey,
The
they don't need to
napkin.
know about that.
the Messier napkin. Okay. All right. So I don't know. Like it's such a complicated situation. I look at it and you talk about matching the term with Hughes or Demko. Like, what's the advantage to that from a team perspective?
None. It's only in the advantage of the player.
Well, to some extent it is for the team. Like,
Why?
I don't know, if the team say they did poorly, all that money coming off the books at the same time.
I mean, you'd be trading those pieces.
That's true.
And he'd have, like, at that point, if you were in blow it up mode, player's gonna have more value if he's locked up long term.
So are you telling me there's no advantage to a 3 or 4 year deal for the team?
Not really, because I mean the cap hit might be a bit
Lower.
lower.
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna say. Because you're buying UFA years, you're gonna have to give them more AAV.
Yes, but even if it's a 3 or 4 year deal, only the first year is an RFA deal, so it's not going to be as steep of a discount as you think.
What does a 3 to 4 year deal look like in terms of cap hit?
So I was kicking around a guesstimation. I haven't had a chance to run this by other people in NHL front offices or other agents, so this is truly a guesstimation, and I want to see what you guys think. The way I was sort of thinking about it was first year is an RFA is an RFA year. His qualifying offer, I believe, is 10.25, or the last year of his current sort of deal is at 10 or 10.25 because it's backloaded. So if you have something around that range, year one being 10.25, or if you wanted to bump it up a little bit, 10.5, and then beyond that, I almost looked at it as splitting the difference between Pastrnak and Matthews, because Matthews got 13.25 on a 4-year deal, but Matthews, the Leafs had to pay a little bit extra because there's an extra UFA year involved. Plus, he's won a Hart Trophy.
Sure.
Like, he's got a stronger resume in that sense. So I don't think he's quite at Matthews's leverage
And the goal
point.
scoring.
Exactly. But
And he plays in Toronto, which will inflate his value to a certain degree.
yes. But I also think you could make the case that Pettersson has perhaps eclipsed Pastrnak as a comparable, especially because of the positional premium.
Mhm.
So if you split the difference between that, that would be 12.25. So it's like, break it down year one if you have it as 10.25, because it's an RFA, the RFA year, and then you went 12.25, you'd end up with an AAV in around the mid 11 range.
That's a
How
lot
does
more
that sound?
palatable. I think good, because when we were talking about an 8-year deal, you and I were throwing out like
13.
12.5 up to 14. Like that's what we were throwing out when we were talking about an 8-year deal. So, okay, I ask you this, Harmon. when we talk about advantages for the team, look, the three of us have discussed it just now. The only real advantage is a lower cap hit. Does the team need to take that into consideration when they look at Filip Hronek? Because how much of a disaster would it be if they had to lose Filip Hronek in the offseason? Like, do they need that kind of luxury, that extra 1-2 million in cap space for next year with the OEL buyout and everything?
They don't need it. I would value the long-term security of having Pettersson signed up as long as possible over minimal AAV savings personally.
Yep.
I don't think they're that squeezed. They are squeezed, don't get me wrong.
But you've got Myers, Beauvillier coming off the books.
Yeah.
That's like 10 million right there.
Yeah. Do we have feedback in the chat about that guesstimation process? It was a guesstimation. This wasn't thoroughly
people
analytical.
liked it. How much does it change if he wins the Hart or a major award, the Art Ross, whatever?
Yeah.
If he wins a major award, how much does it change things if the Canucks don't get this done in season?
That's a tough one.
I know, and
I think he
it's
gets closer
yeah.
to Matthews' range because then he would have the Hart on his resume the way Matthews does.
I just wonder like what the dollar value is. Like if there's conversations going on right now, what does Pettersson's camp come back and say? And I know we don't know the answer. Look, I know we don't know the answer, but I wonder what that process is like. And maybe we'll have Chris Gear on the show one day to chat about this because he's got a lot of good insight when it comes to contract negotiations.
I'm seeing people bring up McDavid's 12.5, and that was signed in what, 2017?
Yeah, folks,
like,
come on.
You can't look back at that. The cap is going up now. You can look at percentage of cap.
Yes, I was just going to say that. That's a great point, Grady.
You know, that's 6 years ago.
Yeah, and that's what you have to do is you have to look at the percentage of the cap, right? And what the player is taking up on the salary cap, and that's how you have to go off it. What was he taking up in 2017? What's he taking up now? That's how you have to kind of base the Pettersson contract.
We also don't have great comparables because it's a shifting time. I mean, think about the deal that, for example, Rasmus Dahlin signed at Buffalo. It's still going to be a good long-term deal for Buffalo, but it was higher than recent comparables for top defenseman with a similar statistical profile as Dahlin, and that's him sort of establishing a new bar, just the same way that Matthews established a new bar when he signed his extension. It's not that I'm saying Pettersson is going to necessarily top what Matthews did. I just don't think that there are a ton of comparables. I mean, if he signs it right now, again, I think, you know, maybe somewhere between Pastrnak and Matthews is makes sense in terms of how you value his UFA years. But if there's the other scenario where this continues to drag on, he continues to pile up points, perhaps wins a major award, and we're talking about at the end of the season, how does the landscape shift? You're not going to have a lot of historical comparables to lean on. You're kind of going to be entering a new frontier in how this is negotiated.
Aruba in the YouTube live chat said PD will be worth 15 million on his next contract if it's 3 to 4 years. And hey, you just talked about maximizing earning potential. Yeah, like if the cap keeps going up, right, and if he continues to be the player we're seeing right now, and in 4 years he's about to hit UFA status, like, yeah, he is probably going to be in that range. And that was in response to the people saying 12.5 is way too much on an 8-year deal. That's the advantage.
He's definitely past the Sebastian Aho extension that was signed in the summer for, I think it was 8 years at 9.75.
For sure. Different tier of player.
Percentage of cap was 11.68. So yeah, definitely a tier above that.